The temptation of Jesus, Matthew chapter 4 verses 1 to 11. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. This is a shock-proof text cited in support of the belief that Satan is a personal being, a fallen angel. The temptations in the wilderness, Matthew chapter 4 verses 1 to 11, represent the desires and ambitions of the flesh or mind of Jesus. When in the wilderness, Jesus was tempted by the adversary or the carnal mind, which is the ego or personality. But with Jesus being full of the Spirit, he withstood the deceptive promises made to him when the personality suggested that Jesus make bread out of stones, use his power to rule over others, or to do other marvellous things to prove his lordship. He said to the carnal personality, "Get thee hence, Satan." The temptations in the wilderness were not physical. This is quite evident because there was no mountain from which all the kingdoms of the earth could be seen, nor was there a temple in the wilderness to which the adversary could have taken Jesus. Jesus went alone into an uninhabited region. For 40 days he fasted and prayed. When he was quite hungry, it occurred to him that he could use God's power to transform the stones at his feet into bread, but Jesus was quick to reject the temptation to use the power of the Spirit for selfish purpose, and he recalled Moses' scriptural advice that man should not live by bread alone. Later the thought came to Jesus that he could be divinely protected from harm if he were to jump from a height such as the top of the temple. Such a dramatic experience would command the admiration of many people, but Jesus wanted only to glorify God, not to use the power of the Spirit for personal glory. So again he quoted the scripture to the effect that man should not put God to the test. Next, Jesus considered the fact that he could become an earthly ruler, but worldly ambition and the exaltation of the self or ego are not part of godly devotion. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. So the question needs to be asked, if the devil was a fallen angel, why would the Holy Spirit lead the Son of God into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil? Jesus was in all points tempted like we are, Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, but who today is ever engaged in a discussion with a fallen angel, devil? If Jesus had been confronted by a fallen angel, the obviousness of the temptation would have weakened the effectiveness of its desire, urge and impulse. If a fallen angel offered to Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, Jesus would know that he were a fake, for God, the Most High, not a fallen angel, rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whosoever he will. Daniel chapter 4 and verse 32. Jesus knew the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament. Jesus was in all points tempted like we are, Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, and every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed, James chapter 1 and verse 14. We are tempted by the devil of our own lusts or evil desires, and so was Jesus. We are not tempted by an evil being suddenly standing next to us and prompting us to sin. Sin and temptation come from within, out of the heart of man. Mark chapter 7 and verse 21. They proceed out of the heart, as if to stress that the heart really is their source. Jesus was tempted just as we are, Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15 and 16, and in this sense he became for us a legitimate example. Paul borrows the language of the tempter coming to Jesus and applies it to the tempter coming to Christians. See 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 5, and we can note that Matthew alone records how Jesus fasted during the temptation period, and it is Matthew alone who records instructions to us about fasting. See Matthew chapter 16 and compare Matthew chapter 9. Seeing we're not physically encountered by a literal personal Satan in our times of testing, it surely follows that neither was Jesus our example.